What they'll never know, we don't think is the why.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't hear. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear the thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. Well, it's not rocket science and you don't need to be a Jedi Master or an expert in criminal psychology to read The Criminal Mind. The trick to getting into Lucy's mind is sitting right on the white and brown bedside table in her bedroom. Look closely.
Closer, please. Closer.
There you have it, Never Greener by Ruth Jones and In Shock by Dr. Rana Ordish. Never Greener is a novel about a woman's affair with a married man, while In Shock is about a doctor suffering a miscarriage. It's about the emotional holocaust following the death of her unborn child. We're going to be dealing with each of these books in turn, in more depth, in more detail. And then I'll be following this analysis with a look at Lucy's text messages, specifically those to the shadowy Dr. A, whom she was rumored to be having an affair with. Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Bear in mind, I'm going to be doing many more episodes on this case. There's so much to unpack. The timeline, the trial, her texts, the browser history, the Facebook searches, what triggered everything. If you're enjoying this analysis, please like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button, and let's get started. Now, before we deal with the plotline of Never Greener and In Shock, I want to remind you of what I said in the previous episode, that human beings are symbolic animals, and what that means is we think in stories. We imagine fairy tales for ourselves. We see people within symbolic constructs. We see people as heroes, villains, comic relief, or as extras. It's also for this reason that when we read well-told stories, we get immersed in the fabric because our imaginations bring it all to life. It can be such a powerful immersion reading a book. One can stay awake at night reading. One can have dreams. One can even have one's daylight hours touched or tainted by the wash, the ebb and flow of wishful thinking. I also want to emphasize just how much reading material is worth in terms of figuring out criminal psychology. I do think it's one of the most underestimated tools to get into the criminal mind, to see what they're thinking, to see in what area they are drawn towards at the time a particular crime is committed. In almost every case I've covered, books do inform the psychology in some way of the people at the very center of a particular crime, and to the extent that one can intuit this, one can get a very intimate look into the mindset, into the thoughts, into the feelings of the perpetrators and other people at the center of these cases. So in the Chris Watts case, it was this book, Hold Me Tight, delivered literally within hours, barely a day prior to the murders. In the John Benet Ramsey case, Mindhunter by John Douglas, some have even speculated that this book wasn't used as a how to get away with murder book, a kind of a blueprint. John Ramsey later hired John Douglas, the author of it, to join his team. Amanda Knox was reading Harry Potter when she met an Italian student who she thought looked like Harry Potter. More recently, we know what books Brian Laundrie was reading at the time he murdered Gabby Petito. Officers doing a search of the McCann's villa Vista Mar in Praia da Luz in mid-2007 also found a book, The Interpretation of Murder by Jed Rubenfeld. There's so much to say about all of these instances. I have covered it a lot in previous analysis in my own books. I also covered a major South African case and was told afterwards that the suspect and his girlfriend were reading my books while the trial was underway. On my Team Peachtree channel, I've also been trying to demonstrate who the real Van Gogh was. How? Well, by looking at the books he was reading. He was a real bookworm. He even worked in a bookstore at one point. So what can we say about Never Greener, and what does it say about Lucy?
Are you sure you want to hear this?
The synopsis in The Guardian is short but succinct. It's about the destructive efforts of a love affair. That's what Never Greener is about. But here's a broader synopsis provided by the Irish Times. 39-year-old Scott Cullum is married with 2 kids and another on the way. So dealing with a pregnancy. He loves his wife, he feels lucky, he's happy with his lot. That's what we've learned by page 4. By page 5, he's cheating on that wife with 22-year-old barmaid and aspiring actress Kate just hours after meeting her. It's an indiscretion that goes on to span 2 decades and ruin multiple lives. Her issues with food and alcohol surface again and again. Her mental health struggles are framed through Matt's concerned eyes. Her obsession with her appearance and her desirability build and build, while her fragility only occasionally pokes through. And that's the end of the review. And, this idea of her fragility only being occasionally visible, isn't that the sense we got from Lucy, who didn't show any emotion until Dr. A appeared or his voice was heard in court? So let me ask you, in terms of this first book, which, bear in mind, Lucy was reading at around the time she was arrested, think about the themes of ruining multiple lives, of obsession with one's desirability in terms of a potential affair, and some sort of unfathomable fragility within all of this. Do they resonate with this case? Because as much as it may be depressing, the idea of a person ruining lives, well, it's quite flattering to the person who is doing the ruining, especially if that person has doubts about their sexual power or their social agency, if they're young and unsure about the world and unsure about their potency, unsure about their power. The ability to ruin others' lives is thus confirmation, albeit somewhat indirect, that one is powerful. And now on to the next book, In Shock, by Rana Ordish, Dr. Rana Ordish. According to Kirkus Reviews, the review reads as follows: Dr. Ordish personally acknowledged the detachment patients often experience between themselves and the medical professionals, the doctors, charged with their clinical care. She sometimes characterizes this as unsettling, a largely unspoken reality in contemporary medicine. And think about the largely unspoken reality that was going on in the middle of the Chester Hospital. Ordish's initially unknown malady eventually ballooned into an affliction of nightmarish proportions. Miraculously delivered from her deathbed, she survived internal bleeding, a stroke, liver tumors, and a heartbreaking miscarriage. Ordish also had to suffer the callous missteps and insensitive presuppositions made by her colleagues, made by hospital staff. Well, if Lucy wanted to break into the mind of a specific doctor in her orbit to understand how rumors go around and how to counter them, well, this was one way of finding a way to penetrate into all of that, and also to penetrate the detachment of a doctor that's struggling to connect with other people. And this isn't fiction either. It's a story, it's a true story written by a doctor about a doctor who learns how to feel and connect with others around her. And that's all within the spectre of death, disease, heartache, and stress, all within a hospital situation. So just in terms of these two books, we see themes of destructive obsession, in other words, love, as well as death within a milieu of doctors and nurses. Isn't that also a perfect summary of the Lucy Letby case? Of course, there are other ways of deciphering the human mind besides looking at the books that we're reading. The gears of algorithms and search engines, well, that's another good way, and we'll be dealing with that. Lucy's browser history and texts, her Facebook searches and messages sent while she was committing these murders. We'll be looking at that in the next analysis. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.